The young mother held her newborn close, tears streaming down her face as she whispered just 4 words. "Please, just look." The rugged cowboy had never seen her before, but the moment he uncovered the tiny secret hidden beneath her shoulder, his hands began to shake. It was a mark he hadn't seen in 20 years. A mark he thought had disappeared forever. What he discovered that afternoon would rewrite both of their lives. Stay with me until the very end, because the final revelation will leave you speechless. And, if you love emotional frontier stories filled with mystery, hope, and unforgettable reunions, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Late one autumn afternoon, cowboy Ethan Walker rode through the quiet mountains searching for shelter before nightfall. Smoke rising from a lonely log cabin caught his attention, but as he approached, he heard the desperate cries of a baby. Ethan knocked softly before stepping inside. The cozy cabin was warm with a crackling wood stove, simple wooden furniture, and sunlight spilling across the floor. Yet the young woman standing beside the fireplace looked terrified. Her dark frontier dress was worn from travel, her face pale with exhaustion, and the newborn in her arms cried without stopping. She apologized for frightening him and admitted she had nowhere else to turn. Her husband had died during the journey west. Leaving her alone with the child, Ethan quietly offered food, water, and firewood before preparing to leave, believing his help was finished. But as he reached the door, the woman whispered, "Please just look." Her trembling voice stopped him in his tracks. Slowly, she pulled back the fabric covering her shoulder, revealing a strange star-shaped birthmark. The instant Ethan saw it, every color drained from his face. He had seen that exact mark only once before, on the shoulder of his younger sister, who had vanished during an outlaw raid more than 20 years earlier. Speechless, Ethan could only stare as memories he had buried deep inside suddenly came rushing back. Ethan could barely breathe as he stared at the birthmark. For years, he had believed every member of his family had been lost forever. Yet that small star-shaped mark was impossible to forget. Gathering himself, he gently asked the young mother where she had been born. She admitted she didn't know. She had been raised by an elderly couple who found her wandering alone after a wagon train attack when she was only a little girl. They had never discovered who her real family was. As she spoke, Ethan reached into his saddlebag and removed a faded silver locket he had carried since childhood. Inside was a tiny family sketch. On the back their mother had written, "May this always lead you home." The young woman looked at the drawing, then slowly touched the birthmark on her shoulder. Tears filled her eyes as forgotten memories began to return. A little wooden cabin, a smiling mother singing by the fire, and a young boy promising he would always protect her. She looked at Ethan with trembling lips. "Your name is Ethan, isn't it?" His eyes filled with tears. "And your Grace." Neither of them could speak for several moments. 20 years of heartbreak disappeared in a single embrace. The frightened young mother had unknowingly found the brother who had searched for her his entire life. But, as hope returned, distant hoofbeats echoed through the valley. The ruthless men who had been tracking Grace since her journey west had finally found the cabin, and Ethan knew he would do anything to protect the sister he had just found again. The sound of pounding hoofbeats shattered the peaceful silence surrounding the little log cabin. Ethan stepped to the window and counted 5 riders climbing the narrow trail. Their rifles rested across their saddles, and black bandanas covered their faces. Grace's heart nearly stopped. She recognized the leader immediately. He was the same outlaw who had ambushed the wagon train weeks earlier. He hadn't been searching for money, he had been searching for her. "Stay behind me," Ethan said calmly as he loaded his Winchester. "No one's taking you or that baby." Grace clutched her newborn tightly. For the first time in years, she had found her real family, and she wasn't about to lose him again. The cabin door burst open. The outlaw leader stepped inside with a cruel smile. "We've ridden a long way for that woman," he growled. "Hand her over and maybe you get to live." Ethan didn't move. "I've buried better men than you," he replied quietly. The outlaw laughed and raised his revolver. The next second, the cabin exploded with gunfire. Ethan dove behind the heavy wooden table as bullets tore through the walls. Chairs splintered, glass shattered. Grace rushed into the small bedroom, shielding her baby beneath a thick quilt, while praying through trembling tears. Ethan knew he couldn't win by staying inside. As 2 outlaws rushed through the doorway, he kicked the table forward, knocking them off balance. One dropped his rifle. Ethan grabbed it and fired a warning shot that forced the others outside. The fight spilled into the yard. Smoke drifted through the crisp mountain air as bullets echoed across the valley. Ethan used the wood pile and water trough for cover, carefully choosing every shot. Years of surviving alone in the mountains had made him patient. He never wasted ammunition. The outlaw leader circled toward the back of the cabin, hoping to reach Grace unnoticed, but someone else saw him. Grace had barely caught her breath when the cabin door creaked open behind her. She turned and saw the outlaw pointing his revolver toward the cradle. "Move," he sneered. Before she could scream, a cast-iron frying pan crashed across his shoulder. Grace had swung with every ounce of strength she had. The outlaw stumbled backward just as Ethan burst through the doorway. One powerful punch sent the man crashing into the floor. Seeing his leader defeated, the remaining outlaws fled into the forest, disappearing between the towering pines. At last the gunfire stopped. Only silence remained. Grace collapsed into a chair, holding her baby while tears streamed down her cheeks. Ethan slowly lowered his rifle. "It's over," he whispered. She looked at him, hardly believing they were both alive. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Grace reached into the pocket of her worn dress. "I've carried this since I was little," she said softly. She unfolded a faded piece of cloth wrapped around a tiny silver key. "I never knew why." Ethan stared at it in disbelief. He disappeared into the bedroom and returned carrying an old cedar chest that had belonged to their mother. Hanging from its lock was the exact key Grace held in her hand. With trembling fingers, she placed the key inside. The lock clicked open. Inside were family photographs, a small leather Bible, their father's army medal, and dozens of letters tied together with a blue ribbon. On top rested a note written in their mother's handwriting. "If my children ever find each other again, remember this. Love always finds the road home." Grace could no longer hold back her tears. She buried her face against Ethan's shoulder and sobbed. "I thought I had no one left." "You never did," Ethan answered, his own voice breaking. "You just didn't know where to look." The tiny baby suddenly giggled, making them both laugh through their tears. It felt as though the darkness of 20 years had finally lifted. Over the following weeks, Ethan repaired the damaged cabin, while Grace slowly built a new life. The baby grew stronger every day. The lonely cowboy who had expected to spend the rest of his life in silence, now woke each morning to laughter echoing through the home. Neighbors from nearby ranches soon heard the incredible story of the brother and sister reunited after 2 decades apart. They came with lumber, food, blankets, and livestock, helping the little family begin again. One evening as the sun painted the mountains gold, Grace stood beside Ethan on the cabin porch. "You know," she smiled, "I almost never asked you to stay." Ethan looked toward the peaceful valley below. "And if you hadn't whispered, 'Please just look,' I would have ridden away forever." They stood together in silence, watching the baby sleep peacefully in Grace's arms. Sometimes the smallest request changes an entire lifetime. Sometimes 4 simple words are enough to bring a family back together. And sometimes when hope seems completely lost, God quietly leads the right stranger to the right door at exactly the right moment. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes that family, faith, and love can overcome even the longest years of separation. We'll see you in the next unforgettable Wild West story.